Alrighty. Good morning or afternoon or evening or whatever. There should be a nice greeting like good morning that is time insensitive. I suppose I could just say hello, but that's not I feel like it doesn't have the warmth or the gesture of goodwill that comes with saying good morning. Anyway, yesterday we spent a little while getting Play and Editor started. I've done a little bit of work since then, not a lot. Basically, where we left off last time was getting the viewport, the scene viewport, to display what plays when we go to run the game. We confirmed that the test game code was running, and in the time since, I've basically only bothered to add input, or I should say return input. There's a couple of IMGUI things that had to happen to make it so that IMGUI was not taking my mouse and keyboard input away from the lower level application. And those things were basically, let me find the file. Here we go. Those things were basically to disable mouse capture when the window was in focus. I added a content area button, which is basically there's an invisible IMGUI button covering this whole panel, edge to edge. And if you are clicking and dragging in it, I have also manually disabled keyboard capture, and that was because out of the box, IMGUI will normally capture your keyboard if you're clicking and dragging, even if you have disabled the keyboard. So I manually had to override and say, no, I want to be able to click and drag and use the keyboard in the view at the same time. I had to set the window itself with a no nav inputs flag, and that makes it so that it doesn't capture keyboard input by default. So that way, here we go. When it's in focus, I have keyboard input, and when it's not in focus, when I've got another window like the inspector pulled up, I'm pressing the ASWD keys and it's not doing anything. And then was that it? Oh yeah, if a click is detected outside of the button covering the content area. So basically, if we detect a click out here or onto another item, I have set keyboard capture from mouse and so on to false. And the reason why is because without that, I was running into a problem where clicking and dragging the window title bar or dragging the border of the viewport would capture that input. So it would be like I would click and drag, and because clicking and dragging is normally what controls the camera in this view, it would move the camera to the right while doing that, and so on and so forth. So things are largely okay for input now. There's a couple of big problems that I want to take a look at. I don't know how many of them I'll get through this morning before I got to move on to something else. The first, and it's come up a couple of times, is that when I interact with the window in some ways, that input capture is a little wonky. So if I click and drag the border, all of a sudden, without holding my mouse button down, it's accepting my raw input. And what's happened is that the frame that I click and drag the border, the mouse down event is sent to the game engine code, but that input stream doesn't resume until I let go of the mouse button. So we're getting an unpaired mouse down event. So we got mouse down, and then when I let go, mouse is still considered down until I come back in the window and click. And that there's a similar thing happening with, I think if I change window focus, like if I go to another application and back, or I forget how I did it. There's a situation that can arise where I go to another app and I come back, and then when I move my mouse outside of the borders of the overall window, it will try and move the camera around. So I've got to find a way to flush the raw input gathered from the mouse and the keyboard, so that if I'm like holding down like an arrow key and then I click away, that it doesn't just keep trying to move forward, right? Which is what the current behavior is now. I had a short list of things that I wanted to take a look at this morning. So there's the hanging focus problems we were talking about. There's the quite obvious problem of when I go to resize, we see that it blacks out a little bit. I have a couple of ideas about why that's happening. Unfortunately, that's not necessarily as clear-cut as I would have hoped, because a couple of streams ago, I discovered that there was a problem with the frame buffer API in the game code. And I don't even understand why it's only working in the editor. I was trying to set up a frame buffer to render into for this test state in the standalone game, and for some reason or other, I was not getting anything in the output, and I never figured that out. So it's possible that that's related. However, I think it's a lot more likely that this has to do with when I choose to resize the frame buffer. So when I go to draw the frame, every frame, I get the dimensions of the viewport, because it can change every frame. I use that first to calculate the edge-to-edge area to cover, because by default, if you just put a full screen image inside of a panel in ImGui, it actually leaves this little border around the edge that I didn't like. So I changed that. But if we go to, here we go, find the code. Here we go. So this is where we do that. We get the edge-to-edge code. From here, we do the rendering and we do the input capture stuff. And then we resize to match that size. So the trouble is that the rendering doesn't actually happen here. So in the main loop, if we go to runtime.cpp for the editor, we got all these other helper functions now. So with the engine runtime run, This is the quote-unquote main loop. This is the thing that gets invoked over and over and over again in the editor application. The first thing we do is we call the engine's runtimes run, and we step its main loop. So we have a runtime nested within our editor runtime. And then we go to doing the IMGUI stuff. We start a frame, which basically just starts IMGUI stuff from the window perspective. Then we draw the scene editor, and I'll eventually have some kind of system by which to change between different window layouts as needed. But we go into the scene editor, and this is where we actually set up the entire UI as seen in here. Oh yeah, did it again. And then it's only at the end frame. So after we've completely submitted all of the IMGUI rendering code, it's only at the end frame that we actually invoke render. And then we actually display the data. So we go to render draw data. We actually display it to the default frame buffer. So I think this is probably the crux of that problem. The end frame is where the drawing is actually done. And when I go to resize the frame buffer, it's actually discarding all of the attachments. So on a frame where I am resizing, I think it's going black because what we're doing essentially is we are rendering to the frame buffer, then submitting an image that references that texture. Then we are discarding that texture, but that reference is still needed when we go to render the entire UI to the display at the very, very end, where IMGUI submits a draw call. So there's a couple of ways we can address that. The first would be to double buffer it. I don't like that approach very much at all. The idea would be that when you render to the game frame buffer, so when the game code itself renders, it's rendering to a back buffer that only gets presented on the following frame. And during the current frame, if a resize operation needs to happen, the resize happens to the back buffer. But in order for that to work, you'd have to render to both frames at once, just so that you'd have a backup. So that when you flip the buffers, that the buffer that was erased has a backup. It'd be kind of a mess. I think, and it's also unnecessary because they were talking about a one frame delay, and you don't have to render the thing twice to display it correctly. What I'm thinking we should do, I'm thinking we should defer the display to the defer the rendering till after, or defer the resizing. My phrasing is off. Defer the resizing of the frame buffer till after the render, which is a little awkward, but I think we can make it work. So what I mean by that is that when we go to draw, this will draw to the frame buffer like normal. If and when we need to resize the frame buffer, we'll submit that as like a job. We'll have a little like a variable that will hold any pending resize changes that need to happen. We will then draw like normal without resizing, and then after window end frame we can invoke the resize on the frame buffer. And that approach has some problems as well, because it means that for a frame, when you go to resize, the frame buffer contents will be distorted a little bit for a frame, because we are still using the resize from before. So we're using the size of the frame buffer as it was when engine run was called. Whereas when you go through the IMGUI stuff, the size of the frame buffer should have changed. We're displaying a different size frame buffer onto a different size window. I want to avoid that if possible. So thinking this through, if I was to move the engine runtime stuff to be after IMGUI, I wonder what that would do. Oh, you know what? I just had a radical thought. I was always considering doing the engine runtime stuff completely separately from the IMGUI stuff. But now that I'm thinking about it, there's not a lot of reason why I couldn't just step the engine runtime in between the begin and end calls, if you think about it. Because at no point in the engine am I rendering to the default frame buffer. I'm always rendering to the frame buffer that captures the game output. And that's rendering to a texture that will be rendered out at end frame. So perhaps what I can do is I can say every frame I will start the IMGUI stuff. I will set up and draw the view, and then render to the texture, render to the frame buffer texture from engine run. And I think before I started studying this problem, I think I probably would have missed this solution, because I had the idea that when you go to submit the image from draw from the immediate mode GUI code, I had this idea that for some reason I thought that it would immediately draw the image, and that's not the case. So what would happen is that we go through all this code, we draw the scene view. The scene view gets the size of the window as it is this frame. We get the handle to the color texture to render, and then but we'd have to resize first. Okay, I think I got it. I think I've got the solution. Let's try this out. So this is where we actually draw. I'll put that at the end. Here we go. Resize. This is the input stuff. Edge to edge, rectangle, input stuff. Okay. Nice. Okay. So going through this whole loop again, back to the runtime.cpp. When we start a frame in the editor, we will start IMGUI. We'll call IMGUI begin. We will draw the UI for the scene editor, which in turn draws the scene view. And the scene view will first get the edge-to-edge rectangle that we need to draw to, then handle the input pass-through stuff for the game, then resize the frame buffer to match the size, then get the resized texture, which might have just been recreated by the resize call, and pass that to IMGUI add image. So it'll say at the end of the frame, use the texture from the frame buffer. Then going back out to the main loop, we call engine run. And engine run has the flag that we put in yesterday, that if we have a wrapper frame buffer, which is the frame buffer we generate on the editor side, then we will push that onto the stack and pop it before and after drawing, respectively. So engine run is now rendered to the newly resized frame buffer, and then the end frame is called, which actually does the rendering to the screen. Okay, I think on paper that works. Let me try that out. Let me turn the music up a little bit too. Okay, click play. We got the game playing. Yes! Okay, that's beautiful. Yeah, so that works perfectly. It's not very often that a solution that works on paper for me works right out of the box. But now we have the frame being updated correctly every frame, even while being resized. Oh, and there's another thing here that I forgot to talk about that I've noticed is that you see that now that I've completely undocked it, so that it's in its own floating window separate from the main editor window, it's actually not accepting input correctly. And that's because even though this is not capturing input, the raw input messages are being routed to this floating window and not through back to the main window. And I need to do that for the game code to receive it. Or at the very least, I need to have the floating windows messages processed by the input in the game. So I could probably just like get away with like going into the floating windows WinProc and sending enterprise input messages from there. But yeah, cool. Okay, so that's one problem done. Let me go back to build list and we can get rid of that. Cool. And let's do something simple next. The next simple thing was that I probably want to make this a separate view from the scene view. So if we take a look at engines like Unity, I'm going to keep using Unity as an example, so I may as well leave it open. And now that I say that, I realize that it actually takes forever to launch, so maybe maybe I'll have to talk through this without the aid. But in a game engine like Unity, you have the scene view, which is where you do your scene editing, right? And then you have the game view, which is where you preview the game. And scene view the game view in Unity pulls double duty because in Unreal Engine 2, I think. Because in those engines, everything that you see in the game comes from a camera component. So you place a camera in the scene, and then that's how you view the game. And in fact, in Unity, all you need to do to get your scene displaying to a player is to put a camera in the scene. And the camera that's ID'd 0 is the camera that renders. I do things a little differently in my engine. The way that my engine works is that you will create a game state that actually contains your game rules, and that game state can load up any scene that it wants. It could even load up a loading screen. It can load up literally anything, and it can draw to the screen as well, independently of what's in the scene. So for example, looking at this view, the Hollow Knight and the Celeste sprites, those are actually part of a scene file, but the spinning rotating text in the middle is actually part of the state code. So I did a scene that contains these sprites. These are actually in a data file somewhere. And in the test state, I load up and view the scene, and I draw this text in the middle, and I do all this first-person camera controller stuff. And that's how you'll primarily render to the display in a enterprise game, is my feeling. So you could totally have and package up a component system that handles cameras, and you could use that as a means by which to display to the screen. But my intention is that for that to actually display anything to the screen, you should invoke that system from your game state. Because what if you want to transition from a section of the game that has cameras to one that doesn't, like a main menu? You don't necessarily, like in Unity, that you'd have to literally make it so that there's a camera pointing at your UI, display the UI in the scene. And I think that's kind of clunky. So yeah. Heading back to the Unity example, because they use cameras, I'll find the main camera here. Because they use cameras to define what's on screen rather than the other way around, which is my approach. The game view actually has a function beyond play in editor. So when I go to, well, first I'll do a quick play in editor. This is a simple little third-person demo I was putting together to test out a couple of assets. I think at the time I was practicing with a little wind system as a little vertex shader that runs. But yeah, like you can play the game in the view, but then when you stop, it's just a frozen camera view. And the idea, I think, is that you can use it to adjust your camera. So if I go to my camera and I go to pan it around, I clicked the Cinemachine camera, tracking cam, here we go. So if I go to pan this around, you can actually see in real time exactly what that would look like, what the perspective in the game would look like from that camera. You can even see changes to how it changes the aspect ratio would work. And that's great, but it doesn't directly apply in my engine. So I've been kind of thinking over how to handle this, like what the best approach would be. My first thought was that, well, I could just make it so that the view pops into existence and disappears when you don't need it. I think that might be a little bit. It might be a little bit confusing to people who are new to the engine, because if they go to play, hit their play button, then the view pops into view, and then it disappears when they're done. They're just like, what happened to my game view? And from a UX perspective, it might be a little bit better to allow folks to move and adjust their game view even while the game's not running. But then there's a question of what do you display? Like, so if I press stop, for example, I've just finished play in editor, so we're back to regular editor mode. But you still have this texture on the display because we're not rendering to that texture anymore, and it's still around. And the only thing that clears it is when I go to resize, because that discards the texture when it goes to resize it. So it's like, what do you display here? Do you just leave it blank? Another thought that I had was that I could do like a little splash icon or something in here that says game is not running or something like that to indicate that they're not supposed to be seeing anything in the view. However, it's also valuable real estate. So I'm thinking that maybe this would be an area where you could extend the functionality of the editor. So say you did want to have a component-based camera system where you have cameras and dollies and things that are located as entities in the scene, or as components on entities in the scene. Perhaps one way that you could make that workflow better is that you could make that system hijack the game view the way that Unity does. I think that's a very realistic possibility. So we could have, by default, when you don't have any systems loaded into Enterprise, by default it's just blank. But then you can have systems that will, while you're working with them in the scene view, that will render to the game view. That might be something that's valuable. So I'm kind of split on that for the moment, but what I'm not split on is that I need to separate the scene and the game views. So I was kind of hijacking the code for the scene view to get this rolling, but let's go ahead and move past that. Let's put this into its own thing. Let's close out all of this extra crap. Close others. And I'm going to start by kind of bringing this file completely in line with the game view. And then I will save it separately. So namespace editor is view scene. IMGUI internal. I don't think I'm using IMGUI internal anymore. Am I? I was playing around with ways to make the input work better, and I started including things that I probably am not using anymore. I think I'm using these though, so if I get rid of window, I should be getting some red squiggles. Yeah, because there's EP window. Give me some red squiggles, IntelliSense. You have one job to do. There it is. And then the runtime. Am I using the runtime for anything? Yeah, I'm using it for the engine frame buffer. So these need to stay. IMGUI obviously needs to stay, and graphics needs to stay. Good, so this is ready to go, I think. Input stuff, resize frame buffer, and then we delete the frame buffer. Cool, so let me confirm that builds. It's, oh yeah, I already built it. Then let's go to save as. This is a thing I don't do very often in Visual Studio Code for some reason. I don't usually use save as, I use something else. I'm gonna change this to be game.cpp. And actually, now that I'm looking at this, I'm wondering whether I should be doing different names for these. Because it makes sense from a hierarchical perspective. You got your editor, source code, and then you got views/whatever view name. But a lot of times in the editor, I'm just using Control P to look for a file, and I'm just searching for scene.cpp, game.cpp. Those might be a little bit misleading. I'll consider refactoring them later, but for now I'll keep up the same naming scheme. Cool, so now we've got a game.cpp. Let's go to scene.h, and I'm gonna need to save a copy of this as well. Save as, and this will be, you guessed it, game.h. Yep. Cool, now I just need to add these files to CMake lists for the editor. So there's the views, we got scene, hierarchy, blah, 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 blah. I will now add the game view. Like so. Cool. And then I need to make some changes to these files themselves. For starters, yes, we need to move this to the game namespace. And we'll do the same thing here. Yep. And then I need to say we're including game.h instead of scene.h. And that's looking pretty swell. I think we're going to leave the rest as is. And now I will go back to scene.cpp. Oh, I need to move game.h into the header. Oh, that's weird. Where did my scene.h go? Did I hit save instead of save as? No, it's here. It's in views. And... oh, it's not reported as having any changes. I was looking at the... I thought I was looking at the Explorer view. I was looking at the source control view. Yeah, so this is fine. Scene.cpp though, if we take a look at its changes, we want to revert all of these. So let's click the button that does that. Voila, and now the scene view is identical to the way it was before we went on this little venture. And the CPU wasn't really doing anything at all before. It started a frame buffer for rendering to, and then left a blank spot for rendering game code. The way that I'll be handling input and things for the scene view is going to be fundamentally different from how the game handles it, because the game code by its nature operates without IMGUI at all. So that is when you're playing in the standalone game, you expect it to work identically as play an editor, right? So all that view has to do is to pass through the input from IMGUI to the game layer. So the game layer is allowed to directly work with the Windows messages instead of instead of having to go through the ImGUI layer. With the scene view, all of that functionality is going to be built into the editor itself. I'm not going to program that into the engine library or anything like that. So all of that's going to be using ImGUI interaction stuff. So a lot things like invisible buttons and mouse dragged events and things like that. We'll come back to that later, but that should be the same way it was. Let's now go to the scene editor. And now that we've gotten this far, we need to add the game view. So we'll say views game draw. And we'll also need the init and cleanup calls here. And of course the header. Bam. Yeah, I think that's everything. Oh, there's one thing I had forgotten. I need to change the window title in the ImGUI code. Otherwise, it'll try and there'll be a name conflict. ImGUI, like what it does for identifying each unique element in the interface, is it like has a ID stack, which is basically they hash the string name of whatever you put in, and they make a hash from that and all of the string names leading up to it in the stack. So if I name two windows in the same layer scene, then it'll have a conflict or a collision. Cool, that's looking good. Let's F7 it. I'm gonna need more coffee in a minute. Cool, and that built, and let's run it. Cool, now we've got a second window for game. I'm gonna put that right next to the scene, and I'll hit play. Okay, and now the game code is running in the game view instead of the scene view. So that's working good. That was a simple change to make. Stopping. Let's take that out of the. Well, maybe we should deal with the with blocking out the window. That's something I hadn't really thought about. When we go to click stop, or if I just press escape in the game, because escaping in the game will. Oh, that's interesting. Hang on a second. Do I have more than one instance going? That was interesting. I didn't. So there's a bunch of cleanup code that I'm kind of skipping over for now. I have to go through and make sure that everything gets cleaned up between play sessions. But what just happened was I clicked play, and then I pressed the escape key, and what had happened was the state like reset and kept playing, and I had to press it again to stop play mode. Okay, and I'm getting multiple warnings now when I ignore the duplicate event callbacks. That wasn't okay. It didn't happen this time, but whatever. That kind of maintenance code I'm gonna save for later. I'm not really interested in that right now. But anyway, the point is that when I go to press stop, it still leaves the last frame of the game in the frame buffer. Perhaps I should go ahead and clear that out. One way that I could do that is I could just render something else on frames where the gameplay is not running. Does ImGUI give me any icons? Widgets, images, and that's just a texture. Deliver text, bullets, collapsing headers, trees, plotting. It doesn't really look like it. I guess what I can do is I can like Photoshop something real quick. I'm not going to. I'm going to just call GL clear on frames where the game's not running, and then come back to the polishing later. So here we are back in the game view. We go to draw. We say if I'm going to begin game, meaning that if the game view is in view, then we go through all this. Input stuff, resize frame buffer. Interestingly, none of this code cares about whether the game is running, I don't think. Yeah, we're only accessing the runtime to deal with the frame buffer. So let's do this a little differently. We'll say if game begin. We'll do a nested if. We'll do if runtime is in play mode. Then we will do all of this business. Else we will just clear the screen. In the game engine code, I try to abstract away from OpenGL a lot because I want to be able to simply supplant the OpenGL API if and when I wanted to. There's kind of no doing that with IMGUI. IMGUI kind of its backend explicitly depends on which API you're using. Like you have to call a different set of IMGUI functions for your specific rendering API. So I'm actually okay with doing OpenGL code directly in here. So we'll call GL. Do I have? I don't have a header for this. Let me do. Include glad. Wait, glad.h is in. Wait, no, it's not. Okay. Glad.h. Or is it glad or? Yeah, glad/glad.h. And that'll give us the OpenGL stuff. And actually, I need a little bit more than that. I need enterprise graphics OpenGL.h. Because OpenGL.h contains my OpenGL error reporting. So EP GL clear. Right? Is that all it takes? Too few arguments. I'm trying to remember. Despite this being an OpenGL game engine, I don't spend a huge amount of time nowadays doing OpenGL code, so even this fundamental stuff I have to look up. GL clear I thought was just, empty braces. Oh, I have to set the bit field mask, right? I think it's like color buffer bit is what I have to specify. Yeah, color buffer bit. Actually, I suppose that I should be doing the rest of it too. Huh. Oh, but hang on. I just realized that in this situation I'm rendering to the default frame buffer, so I can't just use GL clear. I need to use something else. I could add a blank image. Maybe IMGUI has that clear. clear, or no, not really clear. This is really the first project I've used IamGUI on, so I'm not entirely clear on everything that it can do. I guess I could just leave it as the if statement, because if we aren't in Play in Editor, then we don't make this call to add image. So we're not displaying the frame buffer. Yeah, let's try that out. I think that probably will be a good enough solution for now. Okay, yeah, so it's currently a blank panel color. I'm gonna go to click play. We got the game, then I press escape. It goes back to the blank panel color. Good enough for now. I'm gonna worry about making it look pretty later on. All right, cool. All right. Making it through this list pretty quickly. Yeah, so there's two issues listed here that seem similar. I mentioned we should fix hanging input window focus problems, which is what we talked about before, where you change a view while you're holding down the D key, and then it doesn't stop holding the D key. But there's also a bit I noticed where, and I'll demonstrate it, where when you are playing in Editor, so I got the Play in Editor going, clicking away for a couple of frames, and from what I can tell, it's 2 to 3 frames. I've done some video analysis, I've done screen recordings and like counted the frames to analyze the situation. There's a couple of frames when you click away before the focus changes to the window that you clicked on. I've determined that's an IamGUI thing. So basically it's like, if you do a frame by frame analysis of like where the focus is, if I go to tools and go to the stack tool, so this will tell you what you're clicking on and whatever. There's like while you're focused and you're changing focus to another window, there's like the first frame the mouse state is detected. It'll say that your mouse or that your go to dragging, it'll say like a 0 threshold drag has occurred immediately, but the active ID remains 0, and then the next frame the active ID changes. So it's like there's a couple of frames between, like when you're in this window and you're clicking to another window, where IamGUI doesn't consider the focus lost. I'm gonna leave that for the moment. I don't think that's necessarily an annoying problem. In most cases, you're not going to have a game where you're like clicking and dragging like this, and you might click and drag outside. Additionally, I think I'm going to it might be the case that when you leave focus from the window, there's a couple of frames where it's still responding to input. That probably is a livable problem. What's more important is that you don't have issues with mouse input capture or keyboard input capture dropping commands, so that you're not stuck with the holding down the key problem. So let me reorder these a little bit. Oh, actually, they're already in a good order. So how do we handle the hanging input problem? Well, essentially we need to tell the engine to drop any input that it's held when we lose focus. And that's a thing that has to happen in the core game as well. And I might have already done that, I'm not sure. Let's first close everything. Oops, I closed the window. I thought Control-Shift-W closed the all the open tabs, but I guess it's a different key command. Control KW is close all. Okay. So let's go to input.cpp and do a little bit of reading. Okay, and so we've got bind controller. This is all the public API stuff. Process context. Check for controller, wake, bind action, load, control ID. Okay, so let's go to the update method. This is the stuff that happens every frame. So the first thing that happens you see here is that we clear the raw input block flags. So that is this has to do with whether a input control is considered consumed. So you can have one input context use the D key for moving right, and the other use it for text entry or something like that. Each individual key and each individual button and axis on your gamepads and stuff, we separately track each one's block status. So if it's been consumed by another higher level part of your game, then that input won't be available for lower contexts. So that's what that's about, because we set this every frame, so we just clear that. And then this is music's a little loud for me. This is where we accumulate raw mouse input deltas. Mouse input is a little complicated when it comes to getting your mouse deltas. In other game engines, you have to consider it like a distance traveled. And it's not exactly that in my game engine. Instead of using a distance traveled for your mouse delta, I use a speed. So I actually do divide the distance that your mouse has traveled by the amount of time that your frame represents. And this means that when you are using a fixed update for mouse input, the code will be identical to the code that you plug into the normal drawn frame update, which is nice. Reset active context axes. Yeah, so this is resetting mapped axes, I believe, for the active contexts. So these are the values that the axes get put down to. So this is the stuff that gets reset every frame. We don't need to reset all of this every time we lose focus. We only need to worry about the keyboard and mouse. So the keyboard and mouse block states, for example. Actually, we probably could just leave the block states, because we're talking about dropping input, not adding it. But certainly the mouse accumulator needs to go. Okay, and then we just go through and we process all the input. I don't see anything in here about regarding losing focus. Let's take a look at window for Win32 for the engine. So this is the window that gets created when you're playing the standalone game. And I'm taking a look for the messages for gaining or losing focus. Okay, so here's the WM activate app message. So this is the message that gets generated when the game window loses or gains focus in Windows. We dispatch a enterprise event for events dispatch for window focus or window lost focus. So that's how we would communicate this information to the game. It doesn't look like we have any other Windows events that we need to worry about. So let's search for this, search for window focus. It doesn't look like it's being used anywhere yet, actually. It's just something that I have there for future use. Window lost focus, though, does have something. So let's take a look. Okay, so in the input init method, we actually register a callback for window lost focused events. So when that's received by Windows or by Mac OS or whatever, we actually go through and we memset all of the KBM buffer values to 0. That looks exactly like what we want. So what we could do on the editor side is we can just simply, when we detect that focus was lost, not on the overall window, but lost on the game view, we can submit a window lost focused event, and that will tell Enterprise to drop all keyboard and mouse input this frame. And that'll prevent hanging keys, because what happens is that when we memset all of the key and mouse statuses to 0, when that input is next to be used, it's as if you've released all the keys. And so any held key actions will have the corresponding key release. And so that's exactly what we want. So let's go, first I'll copy that out. Let's go back to game.cpp. Here we go. And now we need to deal with lost focus. So for starters, we've got begin game. We're doing all of this if we're in play mode. And then down here where we got resize frame buffer. Actually, we would handle this by the input pass-through code. So we've got the is item active to detect when we are clicking and dragging inside of the content area. And then we have the else if is any item active to indicate whether we're clicking and dragging outside of the window. So this could be the point where we identify that we have, oh, I need to include the header. Let me do that real quick. Enterprise events.h. Here we go. So this could be the point where we've identified we've lost focus. I have a feeling it won't be perfect, but let's start with it. EP events dispatch, and we'll dispatch a window lost focus event. And because we are doing this, we're executing all of this code before we execute the game engine code. This should clear all of the input messages from the mouse and the keyboard that it may have received from the WinProc message. So let's try this out. Okay, we'll hit play. Okay, we got a game. I can control and stuff like normal. So, moment of truth time, I'm gonna hold down the D key and click out of the window. Aha, it stopped. Okay, cool. That seems to be working pretty well. However, there are other ways to lose focus. So let me try. I'll hold down the D key and use Control Tab, I think. Oh, I can't do Control Tab while I'm holding down the D key. I don't think. Oh no, yes I can. Okay, let me try that out. Control Tab. Okay, so we've lost focus and it's still, yeah, and it's still, okay. So when we navigate away from the window, it still seems to think that I'm holding down the D key if the navigation was done by something besides clicking outside the window. Oh, that was weird. I thought what I just saw was that I clicked outside of the window and then it like did the tab event. Yeah, I think that's what it did. Okay. That's interesting. I don't know how exactly I managed that, but I think what happened was that I lost focus while I was holding down the tab key, and then clicking back in and then clicking back out caused that release message for the tab key to occur, which is when the toggle for the text shader occurs. Okay, so there's more to worry about. Maybe I have to go one step outside, and instead of doing the message inside of here when we go to click outside of the content area, maybe I have to identify whether the window's in focus outright. Okay, so here's where I handle where I pass through input from the mouse when we're in focus. I can do an else here and do EP events dispatch when I lost focus. I guess that would work. It feels a little hacky because I am manually calling events dispatch every single frame that we're not focused, but I don't know, maybe that's just the way that I have to do it for immediate mode GUI. Let's try that. Okay, so clicking out seems to be fine. If I do Control Tab, that seemed to work just fine as well. That actually might be the solution. We still have that weird thing where I can click and drag outside the window for a couple frames, but I think that's just an IMGUI thing that we'll have to live with. How about holding down a key while we resize? Okay, yeah, that seemed to have helped. We've lost focus correctly. Let me undock. And then hold down the D key while clicking and dragging on the window size. Okay, that's interesting. When I clicked and held on the window size, on the window resize, it seemed to still accept my input. Oh, and there's another edge case there. If I click and drag on the border, if I click and drag on the border while it's undocked, it'll register the mouse down but not the mouse up. I still have to take care of that. There's all these little things to worry about. Hey Nick Dev, welcome in. You're aiming for a 2D use case? Yeah, for starters, I will probably be developing the 2D features first. But mostly I'm concerned about getting a solid framework by which you can do 2D or 3D. I'm using 3D in this case just because it's just what I did for this particular test state. But yeah, technically I've only started the 2D renderer. Right now I'm working on input capturing. So like if I have the game play an editor going, I'm working on making it so that the input capture works correctly when you change focuses, so that you don't have like hanging keys when you're using the mouse and keyboard inside the view, and then you change, and then it's like stuck thinking you're holding down the D key or something. And I'm getting there. Is the entire engine in one project or split up? There are a number of targets. So I'm doing this in CMake. Let me go to, let me just pull up the folder. That might be a little bit easier. Like this. So I've got 4 projects, some of which have multiple targets. The very core of it is the engine project. It's got the CMake lists that is consumed everywhere. I don't like file globbing. So in a lot of CMake files, people will say, oh, just get me every single source file in the source directory, and that like takes extra build time, and it's not recommended by the folks who made CMake. So I actually list all the source files, which is why these files are so big. But basically, this builds a static library and a dynamic library. So there's a DLL and a .lib that you can use from this. The dynamic version is used by the editor, and it's used by the launcher, which are these two projects here, editor and launcher. I'm working on the editor today. The editor is basically a level editor / build system. It's very similar to Unity, for example, where you can do a new project, and then that'll generate the code base from which that you can build your game from. And that's the fourth project I have listed in here. I have a test game project, which is simply a test bed for me to use while I'm working on the editor engine and the launcher. But the test game project and all enterprise game projects can do either a all-in-one build that links against the static engine library, so there's no DLLs at all in the shipping product, or you can do a DLL through the launcher. It's my intention that the launcher is just used for game development. So if I stop this and load up the launcher and run through there, we've got the same exact scene. This is actually technically the gameplay. This is programmed inside of the game project, the camera controller and the sprites loading and the text spinning in the middle. This is the game as a DLL being run through the launcher application. And the main reason I have the launcher is because I want to support directly working in the game, so folks don't have to work through the editor if they don't want to, and they can still hot reload their code, so they can make a change to their game, hit recompile, and then without having to set up their game state, they're back. They're in the same location, just the game behaves differently. That's a little ways off. That's not very far off. I'm almost to the point where I'm going to be setting up hot code reloading, but then the sixth target is where you just build the game as a standalone executable. And so this is just an exe, doesn't have any dependencies on enterprise.dll or anything like that. And this is the way that I want games to ship. But yeah, it's a complicated mess. The editor right now I'm working on is supposed to be general purpose. So you go to run it. I'm launching this right now without automatically loading the game project. Then you go to open project, and then you locate your game project file, and then it links the DLL at that time. So you can see in my console it says loaded testgame.dll, and then when I go to file, close project, it cleans up after it, and then it unloads the DLL. So you can install the editor and then build game projects, and that's the dream. Right now, the thing I'm getting stuck on is handling pass-through in the editor from IMGUI, because IMGUI is being used for the editor's UI. Here we go. And it's working for the most part. I click play for play in editor, and I can control things. And when it loses focus, the inputs stop working. Well, the keyboard and mouse inputs stop working. If I use a gamepad, I'm going to plug in my Xbox controller real quick. That's not used by IMGUI in the first place, so you can use a gamepad unhindered. And the idea is that even when you're not in focus, you can still use it, and that makes sense to me. But yeah, I'm still running into issues where like this, what I just did is I dragged out the window, and then it registered the mouse down event when I was clicking and dragging. And then it didn't receive the mouse up event. So it starts to respond to my mouse movement without me clicking and dragging. And that's not expected. I'm just not really sure how to handle that. So the property I just added, going back to the game view, was that if the window loses focus from IMGUI's perspective, it should be dispatching the enterprise event that tells the game engine, hey, we lost focus, dump all the keyboard and mouse input. However, that's not triggering when I do this, when I drag the window out, or when I resize it, because the window hasn't lost focus. It's still in focus, it's just that the input was captured by IMGUI. So I'm wondering, let me take a look. Maybe I need to pass this around whenever I set capture to true. Maybe this is all it takes. I'm going to try that out. Okay, here we go. Okay, I think that might be it. So now I'm clicking and dragging and resizing, and it's not accepting my mouse down event. Or to be more precise, it's accepting my mouse up event when I let go. When I click. Okay, so I click, the mouse down event probably is being still sent to the engine. But the fact that we clicked outside of the content area is triggering the window lost focus event, which is dumping the input, which tells the game engine we let go of the mouse button, even though I'm still holding it down. Okay, I think that's it. I think we fixed it. Right? I can't think of a. Let me hold down a key and try and use Control Tab to change focus. Yeah, that seemed to be working. Okay, yeah. And so, for the, there we go. So when I press the tab key, currently what I have going on is that it's changing which shader is being used on the text. I was actually doing that originally to test out the MSDF shader stuff to make sure that it was working correctly. When I go to tab, it's only going to trigger when I release. So if I hold down tab and then I keep holding it down and then I click out of the window, it thinks I released the key because okay. Cool, okay. I think that's actually a perfect solution, and I was not thinking I would have that today. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. Oh, right, and then there's this other thing. When I completely undock the view and move it out of the main window, I'm still not capturing input events from the keyboard and mouse because the undocked window events are unhandled. So we should probably deal with that next. Hanging inputs fixed. Yeah, we need to forward input events from the undocked windows to the base window. Okay. So I've been going at this for a little over an hour. I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to brew myself another cup of coffee because coffee. And then when I get back, we will be looking at doing input forwarding, so that way I can undock the game view and put it on another screen, and it'll still respond to input. Cool. Be back in a jiffy. Okay. Alrighty, I'm back. Got a fresh cup of joe, a little bit of water. Alright, so where we left off, we got the input, basically, and I'm really happy with this. I'm really actually very pleased with this. Got the input to a state where the pass-through is basically perfect. It will stop capturing and it'll send an all-off message for the mouse and keyboard input. If you go to drag the title bar, if you go to resize, you go to dock or undock, if you control tab out or anything. Yeah, so that seems to be going pretty swell. What's not working great is if I move the game viewport out. The game code obviously still runs, you can see it, but when I go to click and drag and use the keyboard and mouse and stuff, it's not working. The gamepad still works, and I would expect so. But what's happening here is that the Windows messages that tell the game engine that the keyboard and mouse have been used, those are now going through a separate window procedure function, and they're not being passed through to the engine. So we're going to need to look at how to manage that. And off the top of my head, I'm actually not very sure how I will, because this deals a lot with the IMGUI docking branch code. And I'm not sure whether I have the ability to simply make those changes. Technically speaking, I'm working on a fork of Dear IMGUI. So if we go to IMGUI implementation 132, I think I had made changes to, I had made changes to IMGUI implementation for OpenGL 3. That's right. And there's a pull request on this now, where I basically had to implement the undocking bit to begin with. Because for whatever reason, everybody who's using Dear IMGUI, basically all of them are using GLFW on Windows if they're using OpenGL. And so nobody ever bothered to make it so you can drag out a window into its own thing. So I added that, technically. And I'm trying to remember where the window procedure was handled. It must be handled in here. Let me handle this by searching for some of these window messages. I will search for I guess WM Karn. I don't remember off the top of my head which messages IMGUI cares about. Let's go to the window code for the editor on Windows. This guy. Oh, this is the generic code. Whoops. window Win32 for the editor. Here we go. And look for the WM messages. So this is the window procedure for the base window, the super window that everything else docks into. And what we're doing is we are in any situation where IMGUI says it wants to capture the input, we are ignoring sending that data to the game engine. And so that's all handled here with IMGUI implementation 132 WinProc handler. I'm going to copy and search for that. And we're going to search, oops, I didn't mean to make that change. We're going to search for it in the vendor/IMGUI folder. And here are all of the locations where that's in use. All right. Cool. Oh, and I accidentally hit slash. So, okay. Cool. All right. So first search result here. 132 message handler. So this is in the IMGUI implementation 132.cpp. Call from your application's message handler. Keep calling your message handler unless this function returns true. Right. So normally what you do is you'll in your own Windows window handler you will invoke this, and then if it wants you to, if IMGUI deigns to pass on Windows messages to you, then you handle the scraps. Anything that it hasn't handled itself. So this is the stuff that's working in the super window. Concerning the other windows though, I don't know off the top of my head where that goes. So there's some example code here. All these search results that say main.cpp, these are code examples of how to use IMGUI. They are not part of the implementation. Everything else is either here in this file or in the header where it's declared as an extern. So I guess we'll just go through these one by one. So this is the actual definition of the process handler. And then here we've got platform window. Oh, okay. I think this is the window procedure for the undocked window. So we got that going on. And then in this, where we have implementation 132 init platform interface, we set up a window procedure as well. Now that I'm looking at this, I'm thinking that I didn't actually touch the window procedure. I'm gonna double check that. So we'll go to GitHub. I made a pull request with this fix, so I can just quickly look up the changes that I made with it here. Here we go, add support for 132 OpenGL backends. Previously this didn't work correctly because spawned windows weren't given rendering contexts. Oh, right, okay, so actually what I fixed wasn't the undocking itself. It was that when you went to undock, the windows weren't rendering. Okay, so I didn't actually implement the undocking part. I just made it so that, yeah, let me find the files changed. I just made it so that the generated windows share their OpenGL stuff. Yes, I added in implementation render window that we would push the platform OpenGL context if there is one. I added the OpenGL context to the Win32 implementation data, which is how data is passed around from the platform to the implementation of the backend. Oh yeah, then I had to do a manual loading of the OpenGL DLL because that's the style that this library uses. Is that it explicitly loads the OpenGL library and pulls in its own pointers. Yeah, it doesn't look like I had made any changes at all there. So this is going to be new territory for me. Okay, so I suspect that this is the window procedure that I need to extend. Yeah, so even here, for example, this is the platform window proc handler. It itself implements the base win proc handler the way that your base window does when you're using this library. It checks the return value of the base win proc handler, forwarding the stuff in. Oh, and I had to add this. I remember I added the erase background because window invalidation would cause flickering otherwise. So we handle the erase background event. WM close, WM move, WM size. And then we return the default window procedure. Yeah, the trouble is that I want to plug things into this, but the API doesn't support that, I don't think. The idea is that, and I'll go to window Win32 for the editor. The idea is that you, in your project code, you will make your own window, and that's it. And you pass off to IMGUI to handle creating and destroying all the sub windows. So here we have a window procedure for the window that I created in my Win main function, which is entry point Win32 for the editor. So basically in here we do the game loop, and then inside of the game loop we set up the window. So we create the editor runtime. The editor runtime creates the engine runtime and creates the primary window, which is, where's the create engine runtime, destroy engine runtime, get engine, set engine, frame buffer. Oh, I thought there was a helper method for this, but I'm not seeing it. Maybe it's static in the constructor. Oh, here it is. So it's editor window create primary. So yeah, in here we do the window creation code. We actually set up the Win32 things. So we register our window class. We set up its initial style and position and size, and then we actually create it using this guy. All of this stuff is handled for us by IMGUI for the child windows. Yeah, so this is actually going to be really This may be really might be a big ol' IamGUI update. Let me see if anybody else has come across this problem before. Well, I come up dry on my very, very first search. Details, blah, blah, blah. How about IamGUI docking WinProc? I'm having the common problem of not being able to separate input from the main application and the IamGUI hook. I'm using the OneShot's tutorial and okay. Oh, this is unrelated. That's people are trying to hack games. Yeah, I'm not really finding much on this. Huh. I don't know. Most people are using the GLFW backend I mentioned before, and so they don't really. So the path that I'm using, the implementation that I'm using is not a super commonly used one, because almost everybody using OpenGL will be using GLFW for their windowing, and I'm one of the weird fools that's doing my own windowing and not using DirectX. But yeah, let me take a look at the GLFW backend. Maybe that'll tell me a little bit about how this works. Let's go to the docking branch on here. So this is the original IamGUI docking branch. Yeah, we're going to go to backends. We're going to look at the GLFW implementation file. And okay, it looks like the implementation does hold on to a window procedure. I don't know why, to be honest. Okay, GLFW. Okay, here we go. GLFW WinProc. Apparently you need to pass through that stuff. Call window proc. We have submitted this pull request to allow GLFW to support transparent inputs. In the meanwhile, we implement custom per platform workarounds here. Okay, it looks like this is explicitly handled on a platform by platform basis for GLFW. And then Okronet, the author of I Am GUI, mentioned in one of the last comments on that pull request that actually I don't think I'm following what this is about. I probably have to read the whole conversation. Okay, so I guess I'm gonna have to do a fair bit of work to get this pass-through working. There's two approaches I can take here. My preferred approach is to come up with a general solution and then make a pull request so that other people have access to that solution. So outside of this project, people using Dear I Am GUI could use my pull request to enable their own WinProcess extensions. And then I could just hack it. I could just make a branch that's enterprise specific, which, to be honest, I'm probably going to want to do eventually anyway for style purposes. And then not even care about making it general purpose and just like straight up modify the WinProc here to pass the events I need to the game layer. And that's totally doable. It's the easier solution, but I just don't like it very much. I prefer to do things right the first time. And for me, the correct way to handle this would be come up with a way for the library to support what I want it to do, rather than breaking down the barrier between library and project. I'm kind of just mulling over the pros and cons in my head right now. If we were to make a general purpose solution, I would need to basically have a way to pass the procedure of the base window into this function. But now that I'm saying that out loud, I wonder if there's a way for you to get the procedure for a window given its handle. Because I'm pretty sure I can get the base window handle, because I needed to pass that in order to allow context sharing to begin with, to fix the thing that I had a pull request for. So maybe I can say Win32 get window procedure. That's not how you spell that, though. Okay, there we go. Because if there's a get, hang on a second. Caution, get window long pointer is actually defined to get window long for 32-bit systems. I'm not even supporting 32-bit systems, so I don't care too much. Get window long pointer A retrieves information about the specified window. The function also retrieves the value at a specified offset to the extra window memory. To write code that's compatible with both 32-bit and 64-bit, use get window long pointer. When compiling for 32-bit Windows, get window long pointer is defined as a call to the get window long function. Okay. So we pass in, as an input parameter, we pass in the window and the index, which is one of these, and then it returns us the pointer. And so if we pass in -6, we'll get a handle to the application instance. And here, if we pass in -4, we'll get the pointer to the window procedure. Okay, that's something. So what we could do, in theory, is set up the library in such a way that when you use this implementation, you use the Windows implementation, you can have the unused events here pass through to the base window events. That may not be desirable in all cases. There are situations where you probably wouldn't want a specific event to pass through to your base layer. So we could, I think that this is going to boil down to how few changes we can get away with the IMGUI stuff, the IMGUI initialization code. So for here, for example, we have IMGUI check version, IMGUI create context. So we create the IMGUI context, then we configure IMGUI, and then we call the platform implementation stuff. So in order to make the fix that I had before work, I had to use implementation 132 init for OpenGL. And that specifically was needed so that when you're using the OpenGL implementation, you can pass in a window handle and a rendering context. What we'd be talking about here would be passing in the details of what needs to pass through to the base WinProg. They say that programming is a thinking exercise, not a typing exercise. However, whenever I'm sitting around thinking about a problem, I sometimes feel like I'm wasting time. So if we were to, well, let me start jotting down some thoughts. I'm going to open up a Word document. So we've got some pros and cons to consider. So let's say option 1 is to pass all unused window messages to base window procedure. And let's say that option 2 is to specify whether to pass unused messages to base window procedure. And then the last option would be specifying each specific thing you want to, each specific event you want to pass through to the base window procedure. So the pros on option 1 is that it's simple. It doesn't require a change to the API, meaning that if I implemented option 1, that literally any project that's using IMGUI would be, they would have this implemented for them. That is actually a con. Oops. May not be wanted by all developers. Let's take a look at the procedure to kind of gut check that. So the first thing that it does is that it returns true on array's background. That's understandable. That's not something that you realistically want to pass through to the base window. The same thing is true for WM close. We don't want to handle WM close in the base procedure. Same with WM move and WM size. We're moving the child window, not the base window. Then we've got mouse activate, which if viewport flags, no focus on click. Yeah, so this is an unhandled message potentially. All of these others. Oh, hang on a second. These are unhandled technically. So in the case of move and resize messages, what happens is the viewport is told that a move request has been made. Then we simply break and we pass that information on to the default procedure. So that is when we go to return on a window procedure event on one of these cases, that denies the default window procedure from having it. We're allowing the move and size to pass through, and we're just saying, okay, be aware that platform has requested a resize or a move. So if I was to implement option 1 and just pass anything that's unused to the base window, these would be passed through to the base window, and that's bad. So actually that just makes option 1 impossible. Or at least just like a really, really, really bad idea. Because it's, that could break a lot of things. Because when you go to move the child window, all of a sudden you'll find that your base window is moving too. All right, so that brings us to the last two options. Option 2, specify whether to pass unused messages to the base window procedure. Actually, option 2 is disqualified as well because of the same reason. Because if you were to say, oh, I want all messages to be passed through, then you are saying that you want the Windows resize of the child window to resize the base window, and that's untenable in any project. So that just leaves us to this one. We can specify specific messages that we want to handle. And that's a much more complicated API change. First, it represents an API change. We have to, from the project code, tell the IMGUI implementation that we want to hear these specific messages. In my case, I am looking for mostly I care about the WM input messages. Those are the raw input API messages. But I will, in the future, need the WM character messages as well. So this is the raw input stuff. I do need the mouse move for getting the mouse position on the screen when you're trying to do pointer-based games. And these are not, I don't think these are bit fields, are they? No, they are just IDs. Let me go to where they're defined in the header. Yeah, so these are sequential IDs, so I can't like send them all through as a bit field. It's occurring to me now that there might actually be an option 4. So I'll jot that down while I'm considering it. That would be to automatically pass WM input, WM car and WM mouse moved to the base window. Yeah, and that's a tricky one to gauge whether that's something that everybody would want. I feel like that shouldn't be something that everybody wants. I guess the question is whether it's important to differentiate those messages, or to whether it's important to know which window they came from in an IMGUI context. Because if you're using the input messages for IMGUI anyway, then you don't even care about getting these messages. This is only for pass-through. So if you're in a situation where you're using IMGUI, you need the pass-through of the input messages so that way you can handle the raw input independent of the higher level input, independent of IMGUI. Yeah, I don't like either of these options. If you were to ask the IMGUI author, I'm sure he'd probably say something like, well, just use the input messages from IMGUI. Which I guess that's another way I could look at it. I could... If I was to get rid of the manual processing of input, I could instead get the input messages from IMGUI and then forward those to the game, because IMGUI is automatically handling that stuff. If we go back to the implementation viewport, yeah, it calls the WinProc handler, and that already handles mouse move, the mouse button down and stuff, and mouse wheel and key down and stuff like that. So we could theoretically circumvent this whole thing, but that would complicate things kind of for me, because it would mean that I would be re-implementing the low-level input for gameplay in the editor. And that introduces a maintainability issue as well, because if I go to make a change to the game, to the low-level game input handling, then I would also have to make a corresponding change to the IMGUI layer that passes input to the game for Play in Editor. And if there's a bug with one of them, then they may have their own. Well, they will have their own separate sets of bugs, and that seems like a maintainability nightmare. Yeah, so I didn't really want to do it this way, but I guess I'm down to the hacky way, which is to make a branch of Dear IMGUI for Enterprise specifically, and then going from there. And then just introducing a dependency, IMGUI will be dependent on the Enterprise Engine library, and then I can add the pass-through stuff I need from the window procedure in this file. Well, it was worth exploring those options, even though I didn't like where we got to in the end. All right, so where am I with the IMGUI stuff? I'm currently on a dirty checkout. because, well, first because I ran and updated the examples folder, and then second because of imconfig. Imconfig, I have defined, I've made a change to it that I didn't commit. So let's get rid of the examples. And I'm going to make a quick note to myself to re-enable these. Later. Okay, so now we're back up to where we were. It looks like we're on a detached checkout, are we? I see 9488. Let me go to modules or modules. So this is my Git modules file where I specify all my Git sub modules, and this is where I got the where I forget exactly where you go to see exactly where you're checked out. Let me just do this on the command line. So the first thing we'll do is we'll cd into editor, vendor, GUI, then git status. Yeah, the head is detached. Let's go to git branch, list the branches. Okay, so I've got the docking, the master, and I've got the fix issue branch, which the fix issue 2600 was... Yeah, that's the fix I submitted for here, which I am still using. So this is actually probably the tip of the fix branch, I'm assuming. Git log. Resolve multiple issues with... Yeah, so... Here we go. This is that branch. Damn, so this is C++? Yeah. Yeah, we're in C++. Solid C++ territory ahead. Are all game engines C++? Not all game engines are C++, but a lot of them are. How did you learn it? I want to learn how to code. Well, I learned it by using it. Is the short answer. In fact, I did it the hard way. I did not learn how to program at school. I went to school for other technology things, mostly digital audio. But yeah, I just kind of picked up and started working with it. Python is a popular one. You said you'd start with Python. There's another viewer that pops in periodically that is starting off as well with Python. If you keep coming back, you might bump into him. Python is nice because it's very approachable. However, I don't know. Like personally, for me speaking, I don't think I really understood programming or how computers work until I started working with C++. Oh, he's here. Hey, Joyo. I know C++ is the fastest and made for games, but can't you use it for backend for websites as well? Yeah, you can use it almost anywhere. I think probably the big thing about using it on the web is that you have to run it on some kind of a server. It's not an interpretive language. So when you compile it, you're making a binary. So on the web, what a C++ program might look like on the web would be that you compile machine code, you put that onto a server somewhere, and then you provide like a REST API or something that invokes it from a interpreted language. Or from C++ on the other end of the internet. But generally, stuff that's on the web is like JavaScript or things that don't require machine language code to run. So Python's a a popular one, for example. So school didn't teach you how to code at all. You learned it all in your time. Yeah, and I am quite proficient now, but that's a pretty recent development. And for comparison's sake, I've been off and on using C++ for about 10 years now. I've been doing it since I was a teenager, and I kind of just was using it to hack stuff together originally, and eventually I got to the point where I kind of like understood how a lot of stuff worked, and I started reading books that kind of taught me the stuff that you're not going to find in a Google search. So one book that I would heartily recommend, and I'm going to go ahead and just throw this in the chat, is a book called Game Engine Architecture. This guy has just a massive, like a huge amount of information that was just immediately applicable to what I was doing. I'll throw it in the chat. Which kind of comes out of this from a C++ perspective, but yeah, it teaches you a lot about how CPUs work. I'm trying to help automate tasks for my coworkers, so that's why I'm learning Python. That's a perfectly fine way to do it. I've used Python for a handful of things, mostly when I need to like process text files into some other form. So, for example, I was working on a control surface, which is like if you imagine a digital mixer for mixing digital audio. It doesn't actually run audio through the board. It just controls the software that does that. I was making one of those, and I was working on the API stuff. So what I did is I captured a whole bunch of data from the DAW software that I wanted my Surface to work with, and I got that in a format that was basically just MIDI messages. And then I used, in order to put the data in a more human-readable form, I took those files with Python and generated a CSV file that I could just open in Excel and see the data. And it's really easy. It's really easy to do that kind of processing, I should say, with Python. My friend uses C++ too, Mika314. Yeah, I'll follow up and make a note to check them out. Ableton. This wasn't a VST. This was a piece of hardware that interacted with your DAWs using MIDI. So basically, it's a little complicated to fully explain, but there's a couple of APIs by which, or I should say APIs. I should say protocols by which hardware interacts with your DAWs. MIDI is a very popular one, where basically you just connect it up. I'm trying to keep up with you in the chat. So you're working on your own project? Yeah, it's been a while since I worked on it. It's been a couple of years now, and I don't know if I'll ever get around to finishing it. The big problem right now is that I just don't have the resources to finish it. Sorry, I have ADHD. That's all right. Yeah, it's on the back burner. I wonder if I probably have stuff to show for it. It was called the MCon. Is this the layout? Yeah, so here's the layout where I last left it. So like this is like what the layout looks like on the top. I have it as a PDF because I was just using this to help quantify all the parts I would need. There's like over like 100 LEDs on this thing, and so on and so forth. It's like, yeah, and these little slots here are slots that I would CNC cut for faders that are touch sensitive, and so you have touch sensitive faders on those. They're also motor controlled, so you have to have motor controllers on those, and yeah, just being able to identify how everything should connect to the microcontroller was kind of a big thing on its own. So I've kind of got this design mostly figured out. Where I left off was I needed to do the circuit design, actually finalizing the circuit design for the microcontroller, and then getting that arranged in such a way that I could easily interface with it through programming. Yeah, and this is kind of, you can think of it like a mixer, but it's not, because it's not actually taking in audio. It's just remote controlling the mixing software. So when you're working in your Ableton or whatever, you would push the physical fader and it would move the digital fader on the software. That's all it does. Yeah, and this one does actually have a master fader on the right. There was a whole bunch of thought that went into the arrangement of this layout because I needed it to make sense for a couple of DAWs in particular. This needed to make sense for Pro Tools because everybody uses Pro Tools, and it needed to make sense for Nuendo, which was my preferred DAW at the time. Nowadays, I just do everything in Reaper, but that's not really an issue because Reaper is so flexible. I could write an extension for Reaper and do custom everything for it because it's so extensible. FL Studio, I've heard, is really, really nice. I've never used it myself. I've seen that it had some nice features. Frankly, features that I think that Reaper should get. I use Reaper because it's so extensible now, for sound design in particular. But also because it's like, it's not just that it's extensible, it's that it does the audio fundamentally better on the lowest levels. The thing that I love about it is that it treats resampling as an output stage rather than an input stage. It's definitely worth trying out. It's free to try. You can try it for 60 days, and then after that, if you want it, you can buy an individual license for $60. It's real nice. I'll throw it in the chat. We are getting squarely off topic though, so I'm gonna need to get back to the programming stuff. But yeah, that's you're right. Everybody uses Pro Tools. Nobody should use Pro Tools. But yeah. Hey Miguel, good afternoon. How you doing? Oh, that's interesting. We got a couple of people in the chat now, but for some reason or other, my phone seems to think that there's only one of you. Anyway, back to where I was. Sorry, Nick. I do enjoy talking about this stuff, but I gotta get back to work on the game engine stuff at this point. Where was I? Yeah, so I was in the middle of reviewing the fork for IamGUI because I'm gonna now make a enterprise specific branch that will have enterprise only stuff in it. So it says 4 viewers for you. Nice. That's cool. Welcome everybody. My phone, I don't have a second screen, so I'm just watching the viewer count from my phone, and that's apparently not working correctly. But anyway, I was, for some reason or other, my fork, or the branch that I've checked out on Enterprise is detached from the actual fix. So the head of the branch that I'm on, which is detached, is 1C9488D, 1C9488D, root 4. Oh, okay. So there's actually a patch that I submitted that I didn't. Oh, that it didn't pull in. Okay, so this is why it's detached. As part of the pull request, I had noticed that I had extra declarations that needed to be removed, and so I removed them. It has no impact on the usability, but I do still need to actually do this. Here we go. So on the IamGUI submodule I have in my enterprise project, I actually need to do git checkout on the fix branch, or that would be fix issue number 22. Number 2600. Cool, now it's up to date. So git status. Cool, now we're up to date with the last push up here. And I should probably commit that before making a new branch. Is IMGUI replacing Qt? I haven't used them yet. Qt, I think, is kind of the king for C++ GUI-based applications, at least in the commercial space. But IMGUI is a lot more approachable for smaller projects. I've never used Qt myself, but like just setting it up and the fact that you have to buy it is kind of a chore that you don't have to deal with here. But if you're working on a huge project where you've got designers working on the UI and you want to completely separate that from your code, Qt is the way to go. IMGUI is a code-based solution. So you don't have an editor that you use to make the UI for your IMGUI apps. You just program it and then it comes out that way, which is why I like it for this purpose. And it's really popular for all kinds of applications. Anyway, so now we've got IMGUI checked out to the current. If we go to the changes for the enterprise Git repository, I should be seeing an IMGUI change here. Yep, so we've changed the commit version. I'm going to stage and commit that now. We'll say updated IMGUI, commit, and now we will fork. Well, we'll make a new branch for IMGUI. And I'm actually just going to do that from the UI here. We'll go to IMGUI, we'll go to branch, and we will create branch from, and the new branch is going to be enterprise. And we're just going to use this to have all of the enterprise specific hacky solutions that we want. And I will fork it from, I keep using the word fork, but fork technically means outside of the repository. I will branch from fix issue 2600. So that way we've got all the stuff that we've been using so far. And if we take a look at it, now we are on the enterprise branch. Fix issue, docking, and master, those are all still there. But now we've got a branch by which we can do all kinds of crazy things. So let's close out of all that, and we're going to hack ourselves a solution for passing through the input, which I'm just going to quickly rebuild and rerun. There we go. So where we were, for people who have just joined us, because I guess there's more of you than I thought, we had gotten input pass through working correctly for the game window. It's not hanging on input when I go to resize and move and redock and everything. But the one problem it has is that when I undock it completely and I move it outside of the bounds of the original window, this is now its own platform window. And it has its own window procedure, and the keyboard and mouse input doesn't get passed to the game from here. So I actually have to make a fix to the window procedure of the IMGUI platform window layer so that the game gets that input. And I just couldn't think of a more elegant solution than just changing the IMGUI code. So we forked it, branched it. Not forked it. Forking is something else. Ask your parents. All right. So in the source code, it would be under the vendor code. Vendor IMGUI. We need to change in the backends. We need to change the win32.cpp here. So this is the win32 implementation for IMGUI. This is where all the Windows-specific platform stuff happens. We needed to go to the WinProc for, here we go, WinProc handler for the platform window. So this is the window procedure for the little window that pops out. And then we need to add some responses to events that occur in here. So we need to introduce the dependency. Let's go back to CMake lists. I think IamGUI. I think I'm using an IamGUI CMake lists. No, I'm not. I'm just adding this to the editor. So this is the editor CMake lists. This is where we define all the includes and dependencies for the editor stuff. IamGUI. Oh, you know what? This actually might be simpler than I thought. I had forgotten that IamGUI is being added not as a CMake project, but simply you're just adding the source files to your project. So actually the dependency already exists. I should be able to just come in here and do an include enterprise. Yeah, enterprise, and then I can do events. Okay, cool. That's going to be really helpful. And just as a matter of style, I want to keep the library dependencies on top, followed by the in-project files, and then the platform-specific library stuff. And then back to that procedure. Where were you? Here, WinProc handler. This one. Now I need to forward some events to the enterprise event system. To do that, here we go. I'm going to need to add some case statements. And for reference, I'm going to pull up my my editor's window code. Actually, for reference, I should pull up my engine's window code. Windows CPP for Win32 on the engine here. I'll do a side by side. So this is the window procedure for a shipping game from Enterprise. We care about, well, WM close doesn't apply in this situation. I guess we care about activation, but I'm gonna assume up front that IamGUI is handling window activation correctly. We need the text entry, we need the mouse position, and we need the WM input. So we need this stuff here. I'm going to not worry so much about opening the menu with the Alt key quite yet. This thing here, WM syscommand, it's a thing that you don't think about too much when you're working with a game engine, but when you're playing a game, like you're using the Alt key for gameplay purposes, the default window behavior on Windows is that if you press the Alt key, then you have options for keyboard navigation. And so even if you have nothing in your menu bar, pressing the Alt key opens up that menu and changes your focus. So you have to handle it in cases where you're playing a game, because otherwise that'll happen when you try to use the Alt key. I'm going to leave that unhandled for the case of the editor, and I'll worry about it later. And I can just copy paste these, I think. Back to the implementation here. And I was just going to use Alt-Shift-F to do formatting using my Clang style, but I'm realizing right now that my Clang format is a little different than the IamGUI Clang format, so I'm going to have to manually get this formatting to look correct. Okay. Yeah, that looks right. Good, we're using spaces instead of tabs for this style. Awesome. And now, because we are not in the enterprise namespace, I have to do prefixes for EP events and EP window. Brings us into the enterprise namespace. And I also need to include GLM and the enterprise window stuff. So let me do that. enterprise window.h, and then include glm/glm.hpp. Cool. So what do we got? Okay, so that's resolved those dependencies. However, the default WinProc stuff, I can actually just get rid of that. What I was doing here was I was explicitly returning the default window proc in each case, but that's not how the IAM GUI layer does it. What they do is they run the base window handler. If IAM GUI doesn't want to consume all of the messages, then they trickle down into this process, and if none of that handles it, then we just use the default WinProc at the bottom. So in a case where I would normally pass off to the default WinProc, I just break and then let it handle it at the bottom of this block. So we got text entry, we've got mouse move, we've got the raw input, and yeah, I think that's fine. However, now that I'm looking at this, I'm realizing that I might need to subscribe to raw input messages on this layer as well. Let's just see whether this works first. Let me press F7 to build all. And if we're really, really lucky, it'll just work out of the box. But I have a feeling that it won't. I have a feeling we'll have a problem. Okay, so something interesting happened there. I clicked the play button once, and it stopped right away. Oh, maybe I accidentally double-clicked. I don't know. But anyway, here we go. This is working just like normal. Got the play in editor playing in this window. If I move it all the way outside, wow! No way! It's working right away. Look at that. Okay, that almost never happens. For the first time I try to implement a fix, that it just happens to work out of the box. So now what this allows me to do is this allows me to undock the game view, put it on a different display, and then depend on the input working correctly. The mouse and the keyboard input here is coming from those raw input messages, which somehow the base window class is subscribed to, and I don't remember doing that. Here in the window, in the implementation on the IAM GUI side. Oh, you know what? I think I'm remembering now something about what I had done on my fix issue branch. And I'm just double checking that now. What I thought I had done was I thought I had passed in the base window style flags when we go to create the platform window. Yeah, okay. So this is the code I was thinking of. In the platform, in the create window method, in the IAM GUI layer, I was adding this extra stuff to pass in the information from the base window, but it looks like that was specifically getting the pixel format descriptor from the base window and setting that. and then sharing the OpenGL context. But it doesn't look like I do anything with subscribing to the same events, or using the same window class. Do I? No, I guess not. So yeah, I guess this is a situation where I'm just not going to look a gift horse in the mouth. It looks like the input's pretty much working as expected. I can resize the window, and it won't accept input. I can drag around the title bar, and it doesn't try to move the camera and things. Sweet. The only thing I have... Oh, hang on. There's a situation I don't think I have checked. Let me try that now. If I am holding down the mouse button, and then I Alt-Tab to another program, then I come back. Yeah. Okay, so there's a situation I haven't handled. What I did was I Alt-Tabbed away to a different program, and the mouse release event was not passed to the game layer. And I think it was in when I have it docked. Let me try that. Click and hold, and then Alt-Tab away, Alt-Tab back. Oh, okay, this is a problem in the base layer as well. Okay, so I've got a situation I haven't quite figured out. Losing the window application focus is not clearing the low-level input. Maybe I have to... Maybe this is an oversight on... I'm going to stop debugging real quick. I'm going to run the game through the launcher application. This is the standalone version of the game. But still run as a DLL. I'm going to try the same experiment, holding down the mouse button, Alt-Tab away, come back. Okay, so it's not a problem in the standalone game. It's only a problem in the editor. So I think I must have overlooked something in my window editor code. Editor, window 132, editor source. Yeah, here we go. Huh. I was thinking that maybe I had forgotten to post last window focus events. Oh, this is an editor window last focus event. Okay, hang on a second. That explains a lot. Okay, so it's dispatching an event that I'm actually not even doing anything with. Okay, so what's happening is that on the editor, when the editor application loses focus, that normally will send the WM activate app event to the window process handler or window procedure. And I am telling the editor that it lost focus. I'm not telling the game that it lost focus. So I should do that here. EP events, dispatch. And this will be window lost focus without a prefix. And this is an else statement, so I need to block it like that. And in this case, the editor will have precedence. I will have the editor lose focus first, and then the game layer. And this event here will clear out the input flags that are being stuck when we go to lose focus. And let me put that on the Mac code as well. So that way, when I go to build this on my Mac, I don't have a surprise waiting for me. All right, cool. Let's try that out. I didn't build... Oh, I'm not running the editor. That's why I didn't build anything. Okay. All right, here we are in the editor again. I click the play button. We've got a game running in the plane editor. I undock it, and it seems to work as well. Now I hold down the mouse button so that it's engaged the looking camera thing. I Alt-Tab to another program. I come back, and it's fine. Okay. Nice. Okay, I think that's it. I think input is working. I'm not too jazzed about having to do an enterprise-specific branch for this, but yeah, that's how it's got to be for now. Cool. Let's go back to the list of things. Oh, I wanted to re-enable these flags. And now that I'm thinking about it, here, I am config. Now that I'm thinking about it, I can actually just commit these changes now, because now I have an enterprise-specific branch. IAMGUI has a list of defines that you can enable or disable that will change the behavior a little bit. I have the IAMGUI disable obsolete functions and disable obsolete KIO defines enabled. And this is specifically so that as I'm learning IAMGUI for the first time now, I want it to be a problem if I'm using something that's obsolete or deprecated. I want to be using the modern practices for this. So I'm just going to save and commit that change. Perfect. And back to here. Okay, so now we're forwarding events from the undocked windows correctly. And when we lose focus, we are flushing raw input correctly. Cool. I think that's maybe it for the big input stuff. There's a... I had a note that I wasn't really happy with how Control Tab works when you're using Play in Editor. So let's fire it up. Control Tab, the keyboard navigation in IAMGUI, is pretty interesting. So when you have a window available, you can hit Control Tab, and you have this helpful little list where you can change between each view using Control Tab and Control Shift Tab. And that's really helpful for an application. It is a little... It doesn't seem like it's perfect, because it seems like when I go to select, like when I go to highlight a particular window, like watch what happens to the hierarchy window here. It goes completely blank. And from what I can tell, that's just the way that the library is right now. Surely that's not expected behavior, but all the examples do it. So I don't like that very much. But in particular, I'm not sure that I like how it interacts with the game. So the game view is in focus right now. I can still Control Tab out. And that might be a problem if you're in a game that actually uses Control Tab. But on the other hand, if you're making a game that doesn't use Control Tab for input, maybe you want to be able to Control Tab to another panel. I don't know. I'm on the fence about that. I'm not going to deal with it today, though. I'm going to put that on the back burner. Let's save. And kind of just be happy that we've got all of this working. Cool. Now, as for what's next, engine-wise, I'll pull up my maintenance list. Firefly. There's a couple of things that we need to do on the low end. Specifically, the most pressing thing to do now is to make sure that all of the cleanup works correctly. So, for example, I've got the Play in Editor working right now. If I click stop, it stops, right? But if I click play, you see that I get a warning that I have a debug break for in my engine code. And the warning is, looking at the debug console, events, duplicate subscription to single event type on a callback, controller wake. What's happening is that when I go to play, I am subscribing to controller wake messages. That's happening in my game code. So go to testgame.cpp. So this is the entry point of game projects, and right now I'm just using it to do Play in Editor stuff. In fact, literally all I'm doing for Play in Editor is I'm calling the main game init setup, and what it does is it subscribes to controller wake events, which means that if you move a controller or you plug in a controller that wasn't already assigned to a player, it'll execute this code. And what it does is it basically just gets the ID of the awoken controller and binds it to player one. So this is just a simple way to get any controller input bound to the first player for a single player game. This subscription event is happening a second time when I play an editor a second time. And that's, that's not going to break anything, but it is going to balloon if I play an editor a lot. Because the event system, if we go into the subscribe method where we have this break going on, essentially what we're doing is we are placing back the callback pointer into a vector inside of a map. So we have, for every kind of event, we have a hash table. We look up the corresponding list of pointers to functions that we need to call back. And then we just call them back one by one until one of them returns true to indicate that the event was handled. So it is a problem to keep appending to that list and never clearing it, because eventually that's technically a memory leak, and it might take a huge amount of time, but eventually you'll hit a point where you'll run into a Stack Overflow from starting and ending the game too often. So one of the things I need to do is I need to go through and make sure that everything is getting flushed from like the input system, to make sure that the memory is being cleaned up from like shaders that get compiled and whatever for the game project. Because additionally to that, every time I go to initialize the test state, this is the actual state that runs the 3D camera thing and renders the scene and renders the text, or the spinning 3D text that you saw. This is loading up its own shader handles. If we go to teststate.cpp, like we got in the init function up here, we're creating a vertex array. We are loading and binding input contexts. And we're loading a variety of shaders for testing purposes. Every time we do this, we're adding a reference to a shader program that doesn't get cleaned up when we end play an editor. So I think that's my next big project, is I'm going to be making sure that all of this, the play and start and stop, works perfectly smoothly for every project for as long as you have the editor open. And then after that, we can start moving on to the more fun stuff, which is actually getting the all these other windows working, to actually get a scene editor view working, where we can actually start putting things into the scene and constructing scene files, and that'll be really fun. But yeah, I think that's going to be it for today. It's about noon where I'm at. I just kind of got up and started working, and now I need a shower because it's 100 degrees outside. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. I'm going to try to start making these streams more regular. They're going to be a little bit more fun to watch now that I've got graphics going on in the editor, and we're doing more visual things instead of more back-end things. But yeah, I'll have to figure out a schedule and then post that and then follow it. All right. See y'all later. Have a great day.
Some banks give you credit card rewards, but make you jump through hoops to use them. With Discover, you can redeem